Hi, everybody, and welcome back to our next podcast of Better Me, Better Us. My name is Haley Muir, and I am joined by my wonderful colleague, Vicki. Hi, Vicki.
Morning. How are you? How has the last month been?
How has it been? I think it's been busy, and I think all of a sudden it feels very dark.
Yes, I hate the dark nights and dark mornings. It just feels so depressing, doesn't it?
I think a lot of people probably share your views, and I was thinking about that just when I was sitting last night thinking about us doing this podcast, because I know we're going to talk about the season and what it means for lots of different people. And it did get me to thinking about people's low mood, because the winter quite often does change how people feel, how much energy they have, how much they feel they can achieve.
It's so strange, isn't it? Because in the summer, if someone was like, do you want to go out and do something on an evening? I'm like, yes, because it's still light. And in the winter, I'm like, oh no, it is dark. I should have my pajamas on and be indoors.
Yeah. So put the heating on and get something beige to eat and then watch some rubbish. And I know of a colleague of mine, an old colleague of mine, she lives in Australia, and I have visited there once. And I think I was telling you when I came back, you just can't help but change your lifestyle because it's light, it's hot. So you're up, you're swimming. I mean, I was drinking green juice, Vicki. I wasn't eating pies. I was drinking green juice. Who am I? I know what has happened to me. Back to normality anyway. So, yeah, today we thought we would sort of talk about the change in season. We've just mentioned the sort of darker nights, what that means, one, if you're a parent and your kids are out more, or what that might mean again for your mood. And we just wanted to talk about and just slow down our thinking really around this season. 'Tis the season to be merry. We're not quite in December, but all of the adverts have started as soon as Halloween was over. I noticed.
I was going to say, it's in the shops, isn't it? It's on the telly and everything.
And I started Christmas shopping. I'm sorry if I've disappointed anybody. Oh, all right, show off. Okay, I'm not even. Okay. And just thinking about that, I think Vicki and I, we've both talked about what it means for us this season and being part of our families, but also what we recognize this season means for a lot of the children, young people and families that we either do work with or have worked with. And we're also very conscious that we're on the A&F podcast. And so many of the listeners today may also have different family members that experience this season in different ways. So if you're a blended family, have adoptive children, foster children in your home.
It's really interesting, and I know we've stressed the season and it being winter and dark nights, but actually I think there's something about that loneliness, that big L word, is there for people all year round. But for me especially, I'm more aware of it in the winter, and when there's so much about in terms of people making memories together as families.
Yeah.
And something I'm really mindful of, and I know I've shared with you recently that my granddad died a couple of weeks ago now, and it made me really reflect on the older generation and how there's a lot of, I know last podcast we talked about parenting and whose responsibility it is to help bring up parents to bring up children. But there's that older generation, isn't there? And there's a lot of old people that can go days, weeks, months without seeing anybody. And actually, with these darker nights and shorter days, how does that feel for those people that don't have anybody? And linking it to the A&F network for birth families. Yeah. How does it feel for those birth families that aren't with their children, that will be sort of perhaps wondering, what is this season like for them? What will they be getting this Christmas? What are they achieving? So much to think about at a time when people are really pushing for that. Oh, it's so exciting. It's so happy. What you're doing for Christmas, who you're spending it with, where are you going?
Yeah. And for some people, it's the complete opposite, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It's that anniversary. It's that trigger of memories. Like you just said, maybe even questions. Are they thinking of me? Do they remember me on this special day whilst they're wherever they may be? And I guess linking it to what we said last time. So you just mentioned, we did talk about whose responsibility is it to bring up children. And we talked about community, parents, networks, different cultures as well have very different thoughts and feelings around this, don't they? And it did lead us on to thinking about, well, a couple of things came to mind. Vicki and I are both women of a certain age. I know you can't believe it, but it's true. I'm slightly older, only a little bit. I'm only joking. But Vicky and I were having a conversation as well, weren't we, about how we feel, both of us, very lucky to have had our grandparents until such an adult age.
Definitely having grandparents as such to this age in adulthood, but equally really reflected that there's lots of young people, both fostered and adopted, that perhaps have older parents for whatever reasons. And again, I suppose that brings up a lot of loss in that process, doesn't it? There's quite a few that I'm aware of anyway, adopters that have gone down other journeys to start with in terms of creating families. And there's a lot of loss and trauma that comes with that. So that when they get to the place, perhaps not for all, but perhaps of adopting, they are slightly older parents, which means that their network or that family system is already smaller. Grandparents might not be around, or grandparents might not be as mobile as they once were and able to help. I know my grandparents were really heavily involved, and you'd spend weekends with them and do activities with them, where for some people that is just not possible, is it, due to age?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that's your view of that, is life in general, isn't it? You know, if I think about my own grandparents, they were getting married at 17 and having children. I have a daughter who's 18. My goodness, no way. So, you know, one for her and two for me. We're certainly not ready to go down that route. So, you know, and then that's linked to society and the opportunities that women now have, can go out into the workplace, you know, so we live in a whole different society now from what was recognizable perhaps to when we were children. And I think linking it again to whose responsibility is it to bring up children or to care for vulnerable people in our society, and or older people as well. You know, I always do still come back to community networks, you know, thinking about your own experience. My family were in the forces. We traveled a lot. So I went to boarding school. So actually, who parented me? My parents did, but so did school, because they lived abroad on holidays. I went to my nana's. So it was my nana and my aunties and uncles that lived there as well. So there were lots of people involved in the care and shaping the human that I became. And I think it's no different, is it, for all of these people that we work with, for everybody, really.
But it's asking people, isn't it? It's one approach doesn't fit everybody, does it? So it's asking those individuals what they want, what they need, what would help them feel like they belong to a family, to a community. Because I was just thinking then, in terms of my gran being in her 80s, she's not a very sociable person. And so actually, if people were there all the time, that would feel too much for her. So it's very much asking people, isn't it? What do you need? How frequently do you want us to make contact? Do you want us to pop in? And that doesn't just apply to the elderly, does it? It applies to everybody. We're all very different. So what belonging looks like for one of us absolutely will not apply to everybody.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's people I know love nothing more than somebody just rocking up to their house and it's like, hi, I was just passing by. Yeah. And that is my worst nightmare. I wasn't expecting you. Like, I'm not ready for you. I feel like, you know, and again, it's just something very little, but it's different views, isn't it? And I loved when you were speaking there, you were talking about what would it look like for you? How would it be helpful for you if you were connected or had that sense of belonging? So like you were saying, for your grandma, that might look very different to maybe my grandma, who was very sociable. I mean, if she could be out all day, she would be. But again, if we're talking about families in general, even within your family network, so even within your household, like you've said, that looks different for different people. You know, I have two girls, and connection and belonging for them still looks very different. How one of them spends time with their grandparents is different to how the other one does. And that's their sense of belonging and helps them with their identities. And I guess they're making the choice of what's important influence in their life at the moment. But equally, I think that's good for their grandparents, because their grandparents are going out regularly with their grandchildren. They're keeping connected to what are young people talking about these days? What are they doing? What are you interested in? So again, it's that connection and belonging. And it happens in so many different ways.
And I noticed some of the examples you were giving there, they're all sort of nice, enjoyable, pleasant interactions and connections, aren't they? And it made me think, if those interactions involved trauma or loss, would they still happen? Because I know we've spoken about this before, but people get so uncomfortable, don't they? And that's their discomfort around trauma and loss. So when someone dies, they might, are you all right? Especially in the initial days or weeks, but actually, who is there every year that's checking in and still talking about the loved ones that are no longer with us? Some people find that really difficult and shy away from that, which then feeds into that person's sense of loneliness, doesn't it? Actually, I have experienced a trauma. I am not welcome, or there's certain parts of me or my history that are not embraced and I cannot talk about, and that can feel really isolating.
Yeah, and it's really hard when you recognize you've made other people around you feel uncomfortable, because then you have a sense of guilt and shame. And a lot of our children and young people that we work with, they will often test us out, won't they? You know, I'm about to get a social work student, and something I'm always talking about is our non-verbals as well as our verbals, because kids are watching you. When they drop something in your lap, they are watching what your verbal and non-verbal responses are, aren't they? Absolutely. And if we look shocked or, oh, wow, that's terrible, that should never have happened, I know that's a natural response for us, but actually a child, that can give them a message that you've hurt me, you've upset me, that's hard for me to hear. Oh my gosh, I am now so worried. And that child feels that burden that they've passed that on to you.
Absolutely. And they start to sort of block that off, don't they, or withhold that. And it really feeds into their conditions of worth. People like me when I'm a happy, playful, regulated child, adult, whatever. And actually, if I'm not like that, people don't want to be around me. So I have to perform.
Yeah.
That's really sad, isn't it? And we see a lot of, I was going to say children and young people, a lot of people and individuals in general that have to perform to feel like they're embraced by their community.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot, haven't we? Where, you know, and again, we work with such a variety of people, you know, professionals, overachieving. And we will often think, because of the therapeutic lens that you bring into to our world now, you know, I'm the social worker, but with that therapeutic lens as well, what's that about? You know, it lends us to ask those questions, isn't it? And we recognize that. But I guess for a lot of people, again, those overachievers will be seen in a certain way by friends and colleagues. Oh, here she goes again. You know, so again, that brings being great, brings some negative slants to it sometimes. Oh, look at Vicky, she's amazing. My name's Vicky, I can do this and that. And, you know, so again, there's that we have such a responsibility of how we present ourselves, don't we? That's what we feel like. But let's flip it back to children and young people. They shouldn't have that responsibility. We should have that responsibility as adults to create those environments, I guess, where we are giving very clear and strong messages that it's okay to feel anyway that you feel, and we can talk about this and get through this.
Absolutely. And it's reaching out, isn't it? And checking in with people like we referenced earlier, but repeatedly checking in. Just because someone doesn't want to be a part of something or doesn't want to share something in that moment, doesn't mean that is it and that's fixed forever. It's repeating and revisiting situations, isn't it?
Well, life is so fluid, isn't it? I mean, absolutely. You know, who I was 20 years ago compared to who I am now, and that's been my social work career, and that's changed who I am so much. So our families are the same, children and young people are the same. I mean, gosh, you know, if I look at my youngest, who she was a couple of years ago, she's totally not that person now, because that was her going through her developmental stages, and that's okay. Life is fluid. We do change. But I think the important message that you've said, and if we come back to, it's a lonelier time of year for some people, although it's happy for lots of other people, it's about checking in. And I know a word that we both hate, but those stable, loving homes, you know, even though it's stable at the moment, linking it to what we've just said, that life is fluid, there might become a time where it is less stable. So thinking about that, how can we help people feel connected and like they belong, so that they can get through those difficult challenges as well?
And not making assumptions And really, yeah, I know we often talk about sort of drilling down and seeing behind the front sort of thing, because actually what we perceive to be a safe, loving home may not be behind closed doors, or
Yeah.
equally might be, but that child, young person's needs still might not be met.
Yes. And back to your message as well, that actually behavior is communication. So even when it looks like a difficult family or a difficult time in that family's life, because a child or somebody in that family is struggling with their behavior, remember, life is fluid. It will get better. This is communication.
And it's made me reflect then on when we think of some what might be viewed as dysfunctional families in those communities. Good God, at times of difficulty, they absolutely pull together. Yes, it might not be done in the safest or healthiest ways, but they absolutely embrace people, look out for people, provide meals, childcare, whatever. And actually, that doesn't happen in all communities, does it? So maybe we need to learn from those around us, don't we? And how people are doing things differently and what is working.
And look at different cultures. You know, again, when we talk about belonging and that sense of connection, I lived in Japan. I was lucky enough to live in Japan and visit other parts of Asia. And the way that they view their older relatives is so respectful. And so, you know, they are the most important people in that family. And the way that families are set up, the way that restaurants are set, the whole culture, it's about your elders and respecting what has come and happened before you. So, you know, the culture there is to absolutely keep your old people belonging. And if we think about the African proverb, which I use in my training all of the time around networks, it takes a village to raise a child. And again, these are cultural norms in different areas of the world. Cultural norms in the UK have changed a lot, haven't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
And you even talking about the communities and you know, some of our communities still exist, but a lot of them have been sort of changed, haven't they, to create this nicer looking world that we live in.
But thinking back to that C word and COVID times, actually, to some extent, that brought communities together, didn't it? In some ways,
it did.
In terms of looking out for neighbours and checking in and things like that. And it was actually really lovely to see people pulling together, because at the heart of everything, and something we repeatedly say, and we said even before we started this record today, when I was expressing my frustrations with some of the systems that we work within, it's about being human.
Yeah.
And just bringing the human to everything you do. Because regardless of policies, practices, what socioeconomic backgrounds people are from, it's just being human.
Just be nice.
Yeah.
Just be a good, decent person. I absolutely agree with you. It doesn't matter who you are. It's just about being decent. I always think, just do the right thing. Or as my nana used to say, keep your side of the street tidy.
Being decent, but equally, I was just thinking then, pause before you react, because I think everybody is so stressed, overwhelmed, overworked at the moment that people are projecting their feelings onto others and reacting and snapping and offloading. Pause before you interact with people. Just pause, just for a split second, so that you're not dumping your stuff onto someone else.
Yeah, absolutely. And bear in mind what's happening in the world at the moment. You know, it feels... You know, I'm just thinking even this weekend, I'm just thinking when we post this, so we've just passed Hoppy Sunday. And I know there's a big discussion now, isn't there, about the marches for Palestine. And again, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because what I am seeing is I'm seeing a lot of empathy and compassion. But I'm also seeing a lot of people, like you said, not being kind, taking their positions and pushing their views onto other people. I always do think, and you said the C word, how dare you bring that back up? But, you know, I do think back to the C word times, and the whole world was proclaiming that they were going to be better. And it was beautiful, because we did see some great stuff happening in terms of communities and things that have stuck. Some of that stuff is still around, but you've just mentioned it again. Life is different post-COVID. people are much more stressed. We've talked about it, how our workloads seemed to have increased. And I don't know if there is something in there about that trauma from the C word is now playing out. And people are feeling that, and life is difficult. And they had that was such a unique experience we all had in our life. I guess this is part of the more your sort of bag, how people deal with trauma, how they come out of trauma the other side, how they reflect it, how it influences how they move forward.
And it's about having people around us to support us through that, to process it. But equally, I wonder, as a country, as a nation, have we had the opportunity to do that? Because yes, we've had COVID, but we've gone straight into so many other, maybe not directly in our country, but seeing so many traumatic events happening, what feels to be almost daily. There just doesn't seem to be any respite from that at all, that there is trauma happening everywhere and we're seeing it on our tellies. And I was then thinking back to wondering which weekend you were going to mention, but equally it's the bonfire night, wasn't it? Last weekend.
Yeah.
And sort of for people with PTSD, how triggering that can be. And actually we're seeing very much real war situations happening on our tellies, and how triggering that is going to be for people, because there is, especially for the older generation, perhaps it reminds them of their experience. But yes, it's just being mindful, isn't it, that we're all going to be experiencing things so differently.
Yeah.
And I guess to take it back to what we started with, that for many children, perhaps more so than, or not more so, but we're probably more mindful of children being really excited about Christmas and this lovely festive time that's coming up. But I'd invite people to have a think and look to those around them to see what other people's experiences are, and to really embrace those people around them, include them.
Yeah.
People have that sense of belonging, whether it's in the family, in the community, whatever that looks like, and to not turn a blind eye.
Absolutely.
Or to try and force people to be happy, because actually we don't have to be happy. Just because it's Christmas and some people are, doesn't mean that we all have to experience it like that.
Yeah, it triggers different things for different people, doesn't it? It's all that different experience. And it's all about back to, again, what we started with at the beginning, whose responsibility is it? It's all of our responsibility, isn't it? I feel, I live close to some older women that live by themselves. I absolutely feel a little sense of responsibility of, okay, curtains aren't open today, or has our kids been round, or, whatever that is. And also, you were talking about what we were seeing daily on the news. I think the other thing that we see daily, and I'm not going down this route, we're not going political, but since COVID, there has been a lot of political unrest and changes. Now, if you really wanted to do a parallel process, the government is our parents. They're our carers in this country. So it's their responsibility to look after this country. So, it is a shared responsibility. We all should be looking out for each other. If you want to look after just yourself, that's fine. But just remember, people will see that. And it's always better to be part of a group.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it there. I'm sure we've waffled enough, but I'm going
to play bingo with your absolutelys as well. I'm going to play.
I've been really conscious of that today.
Well, I'd like somebody else to play it as well, and we'll have a little count off in the chat after this, I think.
You need to think of a different word, don't I?
You do, totally. Maybe that could be a new one. There's so much, isn't there? People say this, though, as soon as the red light goes on, you just become somebody else. We could have a normal conversation and not be recorded. I'm sure we'd make much more sense. But as soon as we press record, something happens to people, doesn't it?
Well, we just love to talk, don't we? And I guess the main sort of message or thing to take away from today, I would sort of say, is have a great November, everybody. But I hope that it's whatever you need it to be and whatever feels right for you. Don't try and perform or be anything but you this November.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one. And we will catch up with you next month.
In December.
Don't. I can't be that old. It can't be going that quickly. Have a great
Maybe we'll wear festive jumpers and take a picture for our social media.
Oh, you're pushing it now, Vicky. You're pushing it. Have a great day, evening, whatever, wherever you are. And thanks for your time, guys. And please do feel free to play Absolutely Bingo.
Speak soon. Bye.
Bye.